New Method Live. I am so excited that you're here on whatever platform you're catching us. Today, we're talking about a really important topic. We're talking about stomach bloating and food baby. And if you're listening, you probably know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean when I say bloating. You know, some of you call it food baby. I used to name my food baby because it was such a known thing in my house that after I ate, I used to have food baby. Not anymore. And you know that feeling when you feel like you look pregnant, whether you're a man or woman, you just look pregnant. And after a few really uncomfortable hours, it magically goes away. And then it comes right back after a certain meal. So we have to talk about what it is and how to get rid of it. And you kind of know that bloating has to do with air in your belly, obviously. But when I tell you what causes that air, I think you're going to be blown away. I know that I was blown away when I first learned about it. So stay tuned. I'm going to tell you what it is. The thing is that it affects so many people. 25% of the general population complains of abdominal bloating. That's a lot of people. And from those people, 75% of those people say that their symptoms are moderate to severe, like really affects their daily living. And I'm wondering if you are like that as well. Let me know if this affects you this way. So if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, you know what I mean. It is really uncomfortable. You have to open up that button and it's just a really uncomfortable feeling. And it's time to find out what's going on with it and how to get rid of it. So before we dig in, let me tell you how you can reach me and my team. So if you're watching us live, let's go. Drop the word live. Let me know that you're here. Let me know that you're alive. If you're watching me on replay, put it on. Don't just watch it like in your closet or in your car. Type the word replay. Don't be lazy. Give me those words. Let me know that you're here. It makes me feel great. And any platform, if you type the word change, it lets my team know that you want a copy of the show notes and we will send it over to you. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe because it just makes me feel happy, please. I work really hard on these. I spent hours putting them together for you. So it's great to get that feedback with that like or subscribe. If you're listening to us on the podcast, it's always the same background. You're not missing anything. Today I'm wearing a blue sweatshirt. Always the stethoscope my wife gave me, which is red. Other than that, I look as fabulous as ever. So you're not missing anything out on the podcast. No matter what platform you're on, make sure to follow us on Instagram because we're funny. My team is funny and, we make you laugh. And no matter where you are, please share this with the people that you love so that they can become the game changers in their life. And in case you don't know who I am, my name is Efrat Lamondre. Everyone calls me E or Dr. E, whatever you feel like. And I invented the new method where we empower people to realize that their symptoms are not in their head because you always knew there was a better way. Let's jump in. Let's jump into food baby and abdominal bloating. And wherever you are, join the conversation. Send us a message. Even if you're watching this a week later, 2 weeks later, a year later, we are looking for your comments. We love your comments. So just write whatever you want. As long as it's nice, not whatever you want, okay? Nice things. Tell us, what it's like for you. So let's talk about food baby, abdominal bloating. You go to the provider, you go to your doctor, your clinician, and you say, hey, I have food baby, okay? After everything I eat, I get this abdominal bloating. And they usually say, okay, maybe you're eating too fast. Maybe you're chewing too much gum. Maybe you have IBS. Maybe it's in your head. Maybe it's anxiety. They say, take some fiber or take some medications. And you walk out and you're like, yeah, but what is it? Like, what's actually causing the food baby? What's causing this abdominal distension? So that's what today's talk's about. But before I do that, I have to take a minute and let you know, if this is your first time kind of looking into it and you've had abdominal distension, bloating for some time, the first thing you need to do is you have to go to a medical provider first, because there are certain medical conditions that are quite serious that could cause abdominal bloating. So you go to your GI, and then you go, if you're a female, you go to a GYN, gynecologist as well. You have to rule out pathologies first, okay? Never self-diagnose. Then when you go to them and they tell you everything is fine, then you come right back here and I'll tell you what it is. Okay. But always do that first. Okay. So if you've never been to a specialist, go to a specialist first, GYN, GI, let them know about the bloating, let them run their usual test. And if they say everything is fine, perfect, then you're in the right place. For everyone else, food baby may not be life-threatening, but it's certainly bothersome. So let's get down to it. Let's get to the root cause and let's figure out what your body is trying to tell you when you have bloating, when you have distension. What's going on? So here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. It blew my mind when I first learned it. The thing is this: when you have food baby, when you have bloating, when you look down and you can't recognize that belly, that air that's in there, you didn't produce it. Your body did not produce that air. The bacteria that live in your body produce that air. When you look down and you see food baby, bacteria in your body just had a party and released a lot of gas, and you weren't invited to the party, but you're hosting the party. That's what's happening. Okay, so it's the bacteria in your body causing that gas. So now we have to figure out, why is the bacteria in my body causing all this gas? And why is there a party I wasn't invited to, but yet I'm hosting it and paying for it? This doesn't make sense. Now, if you don't know anything, right, what I talk about all the time, you have to know that I talk about the microbiome. And if you've never heard the word microbiome, I need you to go listen to my other talks, my other lives on YouTube, podcast, and get to know about the microbiome. But generally speaking, there's a whole world of bacteria that lives inside your belly. And it's really important that they live there because we cannot function without them. But there has to be a balance between good and bad bacteria, and the bacteria have to stay in the right place. So if it's imbalanced or in the wrong place, we have the wrong kind of bacteria, there's going to be a party inside your belly that you are not invited to. So let's talk about what causes these imbalances. What can cause my microbiome to be so imbalanced to make me feel so uncomfortable to have this much food baby? So something you might be familiar with is something called SIBO or SIFO. So let's start with that. SIBO is small intestinal bowel overgrowth. Bacterial overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. So that's when bacteria travels up to the small bowel and it's not supposed to be there. And so you have bacteria that's not supposed to be lower in the large intestine. It goes up to the small intestine and now it's in the wrong place. And when we eat, the bacteria is like, oh, cool, thanks for the feast, and starts producing gas in an area that is not supposed to be produced. So that's problem number one, SIBO. But there's also SIFO, which stands for small intestinal fungal overgrowth. So sometimes you can actually have fungus that goes into the small intestine, like candida. And that is also something alive, just like bacteria. And so when the candida gets fed, it also can produce gas. So you have SIBO, you have SIFO. This is just the beginning of this conversation. And those two conditions can cause gas, and we're going to talk about how those conditions happen in a moment. The way to diagnose if you have that, SIBO is it's a super simple test. It's a breath test. You breathe into something, and it lets you know if you have SIBO. And the way the test works, I think is really cool, is they make you drink something that's going to force the bacteria to produce gas. So it's either going to produce hydrogen or methane, and then you're going to blow out into this bag and collect the air. And if that air has methane or hydrogen, which is basically bacterial farts, I can't believe I just said that out loud. If it's in there, that means you have SIBO. So it's a pretty easy test to find out. If you have SIFO, which is the fungal, it's a little trickier. You have to do an endoscopy and take a piece of it, like a biopsy, to see if you have that. Either way, we're now talking about something SIBO, SIFO. What is all this? The point is there's an imbalance. There's bacteria growing in the wrong place. So what causes this imbalance? A lot of things, but let's start with a list. Let's start with antibiotics. Antibiotics can absolutely cause this imbalance. We need antibiotics. I'm not against antibiotics. I use it if I need to, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And there's no doubt that we need antibiotics. The problem is we overuse them. It's in our food. It's in our milk. Anyone of my generation, we probably got a lot of antibiotics when we were kids. Every time the doctor said, give them amoxicillin, they did. And so many of my peers and my contemporaries still come to my office or their doctor's office and say, I have a cold for one day. Can you please give me antibiotics? Okay. And so they're getting all these antibiotics and they keep asking for antibiotics when you have a cold. If you're one of those people, stop doing that. Stop asking for antibiotics every time you have the sniffles. Okay. I don't want to go into this. It gets me very passionate, but stop asking for antibiotics every time you have sniffles because it's going to mess with your microbiome. Only use antibiotics when you need it. And if you're my patient at EG Healthcare, you know that I try not to write antibiotics unless we really, really can prove that you need it. Why? Because I care about your microbiome and I don't want you to have an imbalance. Because antibiotics, they don't just go in and kill the one thing. They eradicate everything in their way, causing a big mess in your belly. So use them sparingly. Here's the other drug that's very commonly used that can also cause an imbalance. Antacids, your Nexium, your Prilosec, your Protonics. If you're on that because you're like, hey, I have heartburn, let me take this medication. It calms down my heartburn. Guess what else it does? It changes the pH in your microbiome, which then changes everything inside of it. And it changes the balance. Bad bacteria start to grow. Good bacteria is not thriving. And so, yeah, your heartburn is gone. But guess what? Now you have SIBO or irritable bowel or a whole other mess. So if you need to take an antacid, it should always be temporary. It should not be lifelong. You should find out why you have the heartburn instead of medicating for it. All right. So antibiotics, antacids, huge players in microbiome issues, which will then cause that uncomfortable bloating. So consider that. Something else we need to talk about that can cause bloating is H. pylori. H. pylori is a very common bacteria. It's super common in the world. Some people have it living inside them with no issue at all. God bless you, you're lucky. And some people, it can cause a lot of issues for. Why? Because it's a bacteria that's not supposed to be there. And every time you're feeding it food, it's having a party, it's producing gas, it can cause bloating, it can also cause ulcers. So for some people, it really needs to be removed. And that also could be checked with a breath test, just like SIBO. So again, you breathe into the bag and it looks for certain things in your breath back. And if you have it, you have H. pylori. And that definitely needs to be treated. We'll talk about treatment in a moment. Another source of bloating, and many of you know this, is lactose intolerance. You know that feeling you get after pizza or ice cream or cheesecake or milkshake, that feeling where you get that is not a good feeling. That is actually, yes, it's about the dairy, but it's actually about the bacteria. So let me explain to you what that is. Here's how it works. If you eat lactose, you need an enzyme called lactase. A lactase breaks down the lactose. If you eat it, if you have enough lactase, you could eat dairy all day long. It breaks it down into sugar. Sugar gets absorbed. Everything is wonderful in the world. You're lucky. Enjoy your ice cream. But for many of us, we don't have enough lactase. So the lactose comes in. We don't have enough lactase to break it down. So the lactose goes into the large intestine where it's met by bacteria. And the bacteria is like, oh yeah, they have some lactose going and they have a feast. And when they feast on it, they cause gas or diarrhea or all the other fun stuff that comes with lactose intolerance. So yes, it's about the dairy, but it's more about the fact that because it's not broken down, the bacteria in your large intestine have a field day with it and they have a party and they make a mess. Little side note about lactose intolerance. It's a spectrum. It's not on and off. So some of you are like, well, how come on Tuesday I had ice cream and I was fine, but today when I had ice cream, I was a mess? Why is that? Because it's on a spectrum. It's some people 100% cannot have any dairy at all. They have no lactase in their system. So just a little bit of dairy and they're a mess. I'm sorry for you. But most of us live in the spectrum, which means we have a little bit of lactase. So we can get away with a little bit of dairy, maybe some cream in your coffee, maybe one scoop of ice cream every once in a while. But because we don't have enough lactase, if you just keep pushing it and have that extra slice of pizza, the extra scoop of ice cream, that's when it all goes to heck, right? So you have to really know that there's a spectrum and know your limits. Because if you give it too much and you can't break it down, you already know how messy it gets. I'm going to let it go. Another big player in bloating is sugar alcohols. I didn't write it here. Sugar alcohols are the sweeteners that you have, the xylitol, the mannitol, the sorbitol, anything that's sugar-free but still tastes sweet is usually sweetened by something called a sugar alcohol. So your diet sodas, diet candy, diet ice cream, diet cookies that say sugar-free, 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 yet they're so tasty, they're filled with these sugar alcohols. And sugar alcohols cause bloating in much the same way as we've described before. So if you're eating regular sugar, it gets digested in the small intestine, gets processed, everything is fine. Sugar alcohols don't get digested in the small intestine. They go into the large intestine. And once again, the bacteria have a field day with them. And then they create gas. And again, for many of us, it's a spectrum. Some people can not handle any sweeteners at all. They immediately get the food baby. And some people can handle a little bit, but if they have too much sugar-free things, they get that big food baby. So this is one of the things, if you're one of those people who eat a lot of sugar-free stuff and your belly's always bloated, take a look and see if you get it after having the sugar-free stuff. Sugar-free, but full of the other stuff. Okay, so now we know what causes bloating, what causes food baby. It's bacteria. You either have too much of it or it's in the wrong place, right? So let's do a quick recap because you know it's my favorite. So if it's in the wrong place, it could be SIBO. Fungus could be in the wrong place, SIFO. You could have the wrong type of bacteria, like H. pylori. And you can have lactose intolerance or sugar alcohol intolerance. So we need to be aware of the causes. But now the question is, I got it. It's bacteria-y. I'm terrified, a little bit disgusted. What am I going to do? So how do we treat it? So it all depends on which of those things are causing your bloating, right? So you can't just say, how do I get rid of the bloat? We have to say, what caused my bloat, identify it, and then get rid of that thing. So for example, if you're just lactose intolerant, then stop eating lactose. If you're just sensitive to those sweeteners, stop eating the sweeteners. I'm a genius. I've cured you. But if you're talking about a microbiome issue, SIBO, SIFO, H. pylori, or just kind of like, it's not dairy, it's not the sugar alcohols, it's a lot of meals, then it gets a little trickier. Some people will say, hey, just take a probiotic. So I'm here to tell you, don't just take a probiotic, because if you just take a probiotic, what can happen is you can actually make a bigger mess, okay? Because now you have good bacteria, bad bacteria, it's a whole all big mess. Now you just added, what is a probiotic? More bacteria. And so for some people, they actually feel worse with probiotics. So don't rush to put a probiotic in. There's a method. So the first thing we have to do always is make dietary changes. Remove the offending foods. So for some people, it's as easy as going dairy-free. For some people, they have to go gluten-free. But for some people, they have to go a little bit more into the elimination phase, which is something called FODMAP, removing FODMAP. If you've never heard of it, look it up. I'm putting it right here on the screen, FODMAP. It stands for something really long. I'm going to say it, but you do not need to memorize it in any way. Nobody actually knows it without looking at it. So FODMAP, fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. Basically, it's a bunch of foods, and there's a whole list of FODMAP foods that are the type of carbs that cannot be completely absorbed for some reason in your body, and either maldigestion or the wrong bacteria or all the things I've talked about. And then they get fermented and they cause bloating. So for a lot of people, we have to put them on a FODMAP diet. So we have to eliminate more things. Let me put this on the screen for my podcasters. I just read it out. All it says is FODMAP. So you have to remove the things that are causing you the bloating, whether it's lactose, gluten, dairy, FODMAP, or some people need to be on an even tighter elimination diet. So while you're on that, now you have to start healing. Okay, so you're removing, and now you're starting repairing and replacing. So repairing means sometimes we just need some supplements to help heal the lining of the belly, like collagen, short chain fatty acids. It's okay if you don't really know what I'm talking about. Just know that there's an order before you get to the probiotics, okay? Remove the food. You have to heal with certain supplements. Some people might need digestive enzymes at this point. And some people actually need antibiotics or antifungals. Now, I know I just said antibiotics cause a mess, but if you have overgrowth If you have SIBO and there's bacterial overgrowth in your small intestine, or H. pylori that is like in your esophagus, you're going to have to get rid of it with some really targeted antibiotics. So sometimes you actually need that also during this repair phase, depending on what's going on. I recently, last year, had H. pylori. I tried without it. Eventually, I needed antibiotics. And then, of course, we repaired further. So I don't want you to be against it. I just want you to know it needs to be targeted. So you remove the offending foods, you repair the guts with supplements, medications if you need to. And then when it's all repaired, then you can talk about re-inoculating, which means putting those probiotics back in. Okay, so that only happens after. So the order is really important. So working with somebody who knows to put that order is really important, because if you just start probiotics right away, it's going to be a mess. So as I said earlier, if you have an overgrowth of bacteria and you put probiotics, it's going to be a mess. So make sure you work with someone who knows how to remove, how to repair and replace, and then re-inoculate before you start making more of a mess. So that's the beautiful thing about functional medicine. We don't just put a Band-Aid on it. We don't just throw antibiotics at you. We also make sure we heal and repair the whole system, the whole gut. So just to recap, because you know it's my favorite, bloating, gas is from bacteria. It's in the wrong place, it's the wrong kind, or it's sensitive to foods. You have to find the cause, and then you have to cure it by removing, repairing, replacing, re-inoculating. And then some people say 5 R's, which is reintroduction. But the point is there's an order and how to get things right. And if all of this is confusing and it's a lot for you, of course it is. You're welcome to work with me and my team. This is how to reach us at The New Method, thenewmethod.com, in every platform. I look forward to hearing from you, to helping you become a game changer, because you always knew there was a better way. I look forward to seeing you soon. See you next week. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video on Food Baby. I know I enjoyed writing it. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out our video last week on Hashimoto's. I'll talk to you soon.